Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. How's it going for you this evening?
Yeah, it's going okay. Everything is just sort of status quo and just looking forward to getting another podcast in. This is the big 2-5, the quarter of a century mark.
Wow. Yeah, I know a lot of podcasts don't get to that many, so it's great that we've been able to churn out so many episodes. It's still a pretty new podcast, but I think a lot of people in the Calgary soccer community have heard about it or listened to some episodes, and I think we've had some good guests on over the months. So maybe we can give ourselves a pat on the back for hitting that 25 episode milestone.
So if you are a new listener and you're wondering, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
So if you have somehow stumbled upon this podcast accidentally, we focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level. And we throw in a lot of interviews as well with members from the soccer community.
Yeah, and this episode, we actually aren't going to have an interview. We're hoping to put something together, but it didn't quite work out. So we're just going to do a lot of reviewing here of the Cavs, and we're going to talk about their road trip. They finished off their 3-game road trip with matches against Forge and HFX. We'll talk about this upcoming match against Vancouver and do some U21 minute updates and also do a little bit of chatting about U Sports and NCAA and ACAC as well.
Yeah, so we're definitely into September topics because we have a lot of university and college soccer to talk about. And with the CPL regular season winding down, it, of course, makes sense to continue focusing on Cavalry as we've been doing for a couple of episodes in a row now. But Cavalry has had quite the month, so I think it's worth chatting about them this time.
Let's start with those two matches from last weekend. And the first one was on Saturday, and the Cavs went to Hamilton, played Forge, and it was a goalless draw.
Certainly a cagey one. Both teams had their moments, but it didn't often feel like a goal was coming. And I feel like a 0-0 draw was probably the most fitting result. I didn't actually have a lot to say about this match other than that. And it is a rare result for Cavalry versus Forge. There's usually 1, 2, or 3 goals whenever they play each other. Always seems to be quite even, although, of course, the previous time these two teams played, it was a 3-0 win for Cavalry, which was pretty historic in early August. And they've really been on a roll since then. Yeah, I mean, a goalless draw when you're traveling to Hamilton and playing at Tim Hortons Field, I know that Cavalry was not too upset about that at all.
For sure. And then they went a couple days later, I guess a few days later, and on Tuesday they played HFX Wanderers in Halifax, and they pulled off the victory 2-1.
Yeah, Cavalry had a really strong start to the game, went up 2-0 early into the second half, but by the end they were just holding on. So strong first half. Mile Henry, he scored. I don't think he was trying to shoot. I think it was a cross, but no one got on the end of it and managed to squeak into Halifax's net. And then early into the second half, Dan Klomp, who we've touted as one of Cavalry's key defensive stalwarts this season, possibly one of the best defenders in the CPL this year. But he's an attacking threat as well, and he proved it getting on the end of a pinpoint corner kick from Ali Musi to head home a really nice headed goal. And on that note, Ali Musi was putting good corner kicks in all game, so kudos to him for his set piece delivery. But yeah, Dan Klomp, powerful header, very reminiscent of like a Dominic Zator style goal. Of course, Halifax earned a penalty toward the end of the match. I think Daniel Nimick took it and scored.
Yes.
And they looked really dangerous after that. It seemed like it could have very easily been a 2-2 draw. But Cavalry held on defensively. They have been very good defensively as of late, so that has to be mentioned. But I think, earlier this season, this game may have ended 2-2, but Cavalry's defense has really improved in the second half of the season, and they managed to do enough to win the match 2-1.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if this game would have been earlier in the year, I kind of would have expected that goal to happen and ending up 2-2. But yeah, they did what they needed to do, and they came out of it. And I did not like the looks of that match from the standpoint of the humidity and the fog, and everything was wet. I have a feeling that it was a lot trickier to play out there than maybe one would originally suspect. But be that as it may, it all turned out fine, and they were able to come away with the 3 points.
Well, the well-known joke about can they do it on a wet, windy night in Stoke? So I think on Twitter I saw someone joking about Cavalry have been good, but could they do it on a foggy Tuesday night in Halifax? And it turns out they could this time.
Yep.
But Halifax has traditionally been a place Cavalry have struggled to pick up points. And on that note, it was quite a successful 3-game road swing in general for Cavalry, right? Like they went to Ottawa, they went to Hamilton, they went to Halifax. So 3 stadiums and 3 teams they've struggled to pick up points against in the past. And they managed to get 7 out of a possible 9 points. Really strong overall from Cavalry, really showing their championship intentions. You know, if Cavalry does win the North Star Shield this year, or they win the regular season title, I feel like these last 3 or 4 games, that's really where they turn the tables, and they've built up 7 points space between them and second place, and they seem like they're on track to win the regular season title. And if they do that, then they'll take that momentum into the playoffs. And with that weird format that the CPL has created for the playoffs this season, finishing in first does give you a favorable kind of roadmap to the final.
It is a little more forgiving in the sense that if you're the first place club, you can actually lose and still stay in it. But right now, when it comes right down to it, if you're just looking at the regular season title, it really is the Cavs to lose at this point. They're really in a nice position. They've already clinched the playoff spot. When you look at even this upcoming match against Vancouver, if they win on Saturday against Vancouver, York, Ottawa, and HFX, they're out of the first place contention. They can't beat Cavalry and get first place. And if the Cavs win combined with a loss by Forge, that eliminates Forge from taking the top spot. And if the Cavs win and Pacific loses, it virtually guarantees them they win it. All the Cavs would have to do is get 1 point in their final 3 games to clinch. So it's really looking very promising right now for that regular season title.
Right. And I think 3 of their last 4 matches are at home, so they'll have home field advantage. Some of those teams they're playing at home are teams they've, really had some success against in the past. So Vancouver this weekend, and then Valor on September 29th. Then they'll have a tough matchup against Pacific on October 7th, but the regular season table may already be determined by that point. And their road game is against York United, Saturday, September 23rd. Really, like you said, the regular season title is Cavalry's to lose at this point.
All right, let's move on and talk about the U21 minutes. This has really become a regular segment on the podcast at this point. So as a recap, every club in the CPL have to achieve 2,000 minutes played by domestic U21 players. And after 24 matches, the Cavs total is 1,649. So they are getting closer. I guess they're 351 minutes away with 4 matches to play. That's going to average out to being 88 minutes per match, which they did bring it down a little bit in this last match, but they still have a little ways to go. It's mostly been on the backs of Mail Henry and Gareth Smith-Doyle, who have played substantial minutes in the last couple road games.
Yeah, and they really don't have that many options outside of those 2. You have Joseph Holiday, who's a backup goalkeeper, who's, I believe, still just 18 years old. Then you have Michael Harms, who's a right back, who I believe is only 17 years old. As we've talked about a lot on this podcast, Gauthier Natigny was kind of the go-to guy for Cavalry this season for U21 minutes, and he's moved on from the club and is playing in France now. So it really falls to Gareth Smith-Doyle and Maël Henry to generate these minutes in the last 4 games. If one of them gets hurt, I feel like they're going to have to field either Joseph Holiday or Michael Harms. But it shouldn't be that hard, and I feel like they're going to hit that target maybe with a game to spare. But yeah, you're right. They only really brought it down a little bit because it was around 100 minutes per game before the Halifax game, and now it's 88 minutes per game. So they really do have to be cognizant of this. I did ask Tommy Wheeldon Jr. about U21 minutes in their last press conference, and I just want to read his kind of quote, his response verbatim. I was curious. I asked him exactly how Cavalry was going to plan out the U21 minutes for the last 5 games at the time I asked him. And this is exactly what he said. So this is his quote. "It's an excellent rule, but you've got to use it strategically. I think you've always got to play the right players for the right game. We've always been one that's not necessarily in the top half of the U21 minutes, yet we've sold 4 of our U21 players. So we're obviously doing something right with them, and I think that was the purpose of this rule. It's not how many minutes you get, but how much quality you can get within those minutes. That's been our rule from day one, from Victor Laturi to Arabin Peppel to Mo Farsi to Gote Natigni. I think we've become the model because you can run out the table, and I think the highest 2 are Valor and Vancouver. No disrespect, but they're at the wrong end of the other table. So we'll do it like we've always done, strategically.
It's a little bit tight getting with 4 games left in the season, but I kind of think they're going to be able to pull it off. And by the way, here's my bold prediction for this weekend's match against Vancouver, that Michael Harms will be in the 18. I probably won't start, but I have a feeling that he'll be dressed, and if the opportunity presents itself, he'll get some minutes. But I have no inside knowledge, but I'm just making that prediction.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a fair prediction. I think he played well in the one game that he did get this season. So I feel like, it's not too much of a gamble to put him on against a team that may not actually get to attack that much, depending on how the game goes. Vancouver is, of course, struggling this year. They're in last. Cavalry's in first. Cavalry's at home. You can expect Cavalry to be on the offensive for most of the match. But as we've seen, that might not be what actually happens. Yeah, I was thinking about Tommy's answer, and I like what he said about how even though they're not generating that many minutes compared to some other clubs, particularly Pacific, I think 1 year Pacific had 10,000 U21 minutes. If you look at the U21 players that Cavalry has produced, they're the ones that have gone on to these, better and bigger opportunities, right? All of them. Victor Laturi, Arabin Peppel, Mo Farsi, Gote Natigni. It seems like they have had a really good approach to the way they field their U21 players and give them opportunities to advance their careers and develop that experience.
Quality over quantity, I guess. Let's go on and talk a little bit about all the various different post-secondary leagues playing right now. And we can start off with U Sports. There were a few big matches this weekend in Canada West. And the first match I wanted to mention was on the women's side. The Dinos were facing MacEwan in Edmonton. And this was a big matchup between the top 2 teams in the division. And MacEwan did pull off the victory 1-0 on a goal from Calgary and Grace Maswala. The Dinos essentially dropped into second place, but they did also have on that road trip, they played the U of A and beat them up in Edmonton. So 1 win, 1 loss. They did fall out of the top 10 nationally, but that was a big match against MacEwan, and those are 2 pretty powerful teams in Canada West, and they weren't able to quite nail it. So on the men's side, Mount Royal faced U of A, and this was another big matchup to decide first place in the division, and U of A won 1-0, so they're now in first place. Mount Royal also played MacEwan, and they won. They hold steady nationally at number 7. What do you think, Scott? Those are 2 pretty big matches.
Yeah, definitely 2 early top-of-the-table clashes in the Prairie Division of Canada West. And then I think on the men's side for the Dinos, they lost both games on a trip to Edmonton. So that has been a rough start for them. They're still seeking their first win, and I think they're 0-3-1 at the moment. But the Cougars are clicking. They're in second behind the U of A with a 4-1 record. I do feel like they'll be ruining that loss to Alberta, considering they were at home. It was, I believe, a late goal, I want to say, that U of A scored.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and it was actually a former FC Edmonton player who scored it, Marcus Velado Tsagai, if you remember him from the inaugural 2019 season.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that name because it is a memorable name.
Yeah, because he was young back. I think he was 17 in that inaugural season, so he'd be in his early 20s now. But looks like he's landed with the Golden Bears. And on the women's side, another kind of heavyweight battle in the Prairies division, maybe even in Canada West overall, between the Dinos and MacEwan. It was always going to be a really good battle, and I guess you could call it the Diogo Raposo Derby because he's coached both of those teams. But yeah, I mean, I root for the Dinos, right? I'm a U of C alum, so I was disappointed to see they couldn't come out on top. But at least a Calgarian, was able to be the reason why, right? Grace Masala has had a great season, and she scored the deciding goal. So she continues her stellar performance for MacEwan Griffins this year.
And just to round out for the fourth team in U Sports based out of Calgary, Mount Royal women's team, they tied Trinity Western in their only match of the past weekend.
Yeah, and it was a morale booster, I would say, because it was actually a 90th minute equalizer. So they're, as we mentioned in a previous episode, they're playing in the Pacific Division this year, which I think is a tough challenge. It's a lot more travel. It's a lot more, bus and flying time. And I do think, you're playing teams that can train outside all year round. And I think traditionally BC teams have kind of been stronger when it comes to Canada West compared to the other provinces. But yeah, a good way to finish off what was probably a tough match against the Spartans.
Okay, let's move over to the college ranks. And this past weekend was the opening weekend for the ACAC season. We'll start off with the men, and there was an all-Calgary derby between SAIT and Ambrose, and SAIT won 2-0. And currently, the SAIT men are ranked third nationally amongst the college teams in the Canadian College Association. Then on the women's side, there was also the same derby, the Ambrose SAIT derby, and SAIT won 15-0. And then this kind of goes against what I had originally said. I was under the impression that always matches were men's and women's combined, but the women did go play Augustana and the men didn't. So it was just that match, and SAIT beat Augustana 9-0. Right now, SAIT is ranked 14th nationally. Interestingly enough, they are the third-ranked ACAC team behind Keano and Lethbridge. So I'm kind of curious to see if SAIT is pulling off these dominant victories, yet they're still considered to be the third best team in Alberta. That makes me kind of wonder, what are those matches going to be like?
Yeah, and I think we'll find out eventually when they play those two teams. Do they play those two teams? Yeah, they do, right? Because in the South,
they will play Lethbridge, but I don't think they'll play Canada because I think you only stay in your division, like north or south. So I don't think they'll play Canada unless it gets to the playoffs. But I think they do play Lethbridge, though.
Okay, but I mean, I don't know if you know the sports journalist Ben Steiner. Is that name?
I do. Yes, he does a lot of college stuff. Yeah,
I know he did a pretty interesting article last week about the lack of parity in women's soccer and youth sports. And he really dug into that and highlighted a lot of really lopsided results that were like 8-0, 6-1, 12-0, that kind of thing. And it was really pronounced in Ontario, but there were also some examples from Canada West. But it seems like he could have maybe extended that to college soccer, because it looks like in the ACAC there's huge gaps in quality between some of the teams. You shouldn't be seeing a 15-0 and a 9-0 result. I know SAIT is good. We talked to one of their coaches last week about the team, and we know where they've been in the past and where they want to go. It's too bad that they're not getting challenged in some of these games. I mean, 15-0 and 9-0. There's not much you can really talk about in terms of the game. It was a slaughter, right?
Yep, that is true. I thought we would talk a little NCAA. I really kind of get a kick out of following what's going on down in NCAA in the women's division. There are 20 Calgarians playing in Division I women's soccer, and I've been trying to keep track of how they're doing on a week-by-week basis. And even to the point now where I've kind of made myself a little spreadsheet and I'm keeping track of everything. And if you go to our website at yycsoccer.com, there is a button on there for our Substack page. And I did a little article, and it's really only if you're really interested in sort of these like weird niche little things like I am. But if you want to see the stats and the breakdowns of the 20 players that are playing in the NCAA, I kind of broke it down in there and stuff. I guess if I want to really give you the real brief Coles notes, of the 20 Calgarians playing, 8 of them are playing for 2 different teams, Memphis and Maine. And I think as far as how those teams are doing, Memphis is doing really well. And I think we kind of already know quite a bit about Memphis, Maya Jones, and there's 3 other Calgarians on there as well. They're all playing regularly. And they're ranked 13th nationally, and they've got a record of 5 wins and a loss. Maine also has the 4 Calgarians. They're all playing pretty regularly, and they leave their conference with a record of 5 wins and 3 ties, but they haven't been able to crack the top 25 nationally or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Memphis connection, I think we've talked about it. Yeah, Maya Jones definitely, but Grace Storty and Izzy Monk, and the fourth one is escaping me. But
it's Anna Hauer. She's a freshman. Yeah,
freshman. Okay, because we know that they all played, or 3 of them played for Foothills WFC in the summertime, and they've been playing for Memphis, most of them, for a while. So that connection is pretty well established, right? And it's neat that there's this soccer connection between Calgary and Memphis, of all places. I was surprised to see that it was 20 that are playing in the NCAA. I think that's a really impressive number, and it speaks to Calgary's kind of growing reputation as a soccer city. Because I know that some of the coaches in Calgary have relationships with schools in the US, and a lot of players, when they're in junior high and high school, like that's their aim, to get down and play in the NCAA. And it seems like more and more are doing it, which is great.
Yeah, and I'm the first to admit I might be missing people off that list, but I do have that list together. And if there's any other ones I'm missing, please feel free to reach out to us through our social media or leave us a message on our website, and I would be happy to track them. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I'm kind of curious to see how Maine's going to turn out here, because even if they don't turn into a top 25 ranked team, if they win their conference, that sends them to their national tournament. So they do get the opportunity to, get in there with all the really big clubs. So I guess we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting story. Maine, in addition to having 4 Calgarians, they're chock full of Canadians. They've got I can't remember how many Canadians overall, but a good chunk of their team are from north of the border.
Do you know which club those 4 players came from? Were they all from the same club? Is it like their coach knows someone down in Maine, and that's how that pipeline started?
So of the players, like 2 of them are the Schneider sisters, Mila and Emma, but they're both Blizzard players. They played for Blizzard in League One Alberta, and they went through the Blizzard system. The other player who's playing a lot is Rebecca Grisdale, and she's from the Foothills program. She's actually a transfer. She did her freshman year at Memphis last year, but I don't think she really played very much. And this year she ended up in Maine, and she's playing a lot. She's on the back line, and I think she's virtually played every minute as a sophomore. So it seems like from a playing time standpoint, it was a good move for her. But yeah, she's Foothills as well. I think she played League One. Maybe she even played a mix of League One and UWS, but she was on the Foothills team. The 4th player that's with me is Victoria Dungy, and she is a freshman, and she was with Foothills League One Alberta this year. So yeah, that's the connection there. So of those 4 players that are with Maine, 2 of them Foothills backgrounds, and the 2 Schneider sisters have Blizzard backgrounds.
Okay, interesting. But like I'll just reiterate, it's neat to see Calgarians succeed down in the States. NCAA is a tough nut to crack, and seems like a lot of Calgarians have successfully taken that route.
And I'm going to continue to keep my eyes on that over the next few weeks and leading into their national tournament. And I think that pretty much covers it for this week. Scott, is there anything else you want to add in? Or I think we've hit a bunch of topics, and we've filled the time even without an interview this week.
Yeah. I think it's a great time of year to talk about Calgary soccer, because we got the college teams going, and we've got the end of the regular season in the CPL to chat about, and Cavalry's obviously on a hot streak. I'm excited to keep talking about these teams, and hopefully next week we'll get that interview, or we'll get another interview in. I do plan to be at Saturday's game against Vancouver at Spruce Meadows. It's been quite a while since I've been at a Cavalry game, so I'm excited to get back and see everybody for the first time and since probably early August.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's going to be one I'm going to have to miss. But we'll catch you at the next one, I guess, Scott. But I can't swing this one on my schedule this week. So
I'm very curious to see how they finish this year. If they win the title, like the North Star Shield, if they win the playoffs, I think that would. I don't consider myself per se like a Cavalry fan, but it would be very cool to see. And I think their fan base is growing, and winning a championship would make it grow even more.
Definitely. And then, of course, if they qualify for CONCACAF next year, that would be a really that could really be interesting as well. But that's a whole other topic for another day. So,
hey, could you imagine getting media accreditation for a trip down to like Honduras or something?
Oh, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking, what about hanging out in the Spruce Meadows press box if another team that qualified for CONCACAF next year, they're based in Miami. They're
yeah. Do you think there would be a sellout that game if that happened?
You could make an argument that you could probably buy a season ticket and you could probably subsidize all the rest of your tickets for the whole year by selling your Messi ticket.
Yeah, your Messi ticket, exactly. Well, that happens, it would be a dream come true for me. I haven't seen Messi play live, and that's on my bucket list, and I'm worried he's going to retire before I get to. So let's cross our fingers that hypothetical scenario happens. It would be pretty cool to ask him a question during a press conference.
Oh yeah, that would be something. I'm not holding my breath. A lot of things have to happen for the draw to fall that way and everything, but it's theoretically it's possible.
Well, let's see what happens.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast by using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com, where there's more information about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. And you can follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.